Hello friends, I hope you're doing well. I think this is probably the most important topic that I've ever talked about, and the timing is also very important. I know everyone, most people, just about everyone is trying their best. I know that you have to work hard to have a good life in Australia, and make no mistake. And also, I'm optimistic. I am optimistic. I think there are some positive patterns happening around the world that are leading us in the right direction. In the right direction, I'm talking about more productivity. I'm talking about peace. But there is a bit of a pattern happening, which is potentially very, very harmful, and I want to highlight that right now. I don't know if you can see on the board here, it might be written backwards. It says, we should look after our own first. A common line, and you see it quite often now with election campaigns and so on. Absolutely, without a doubt, we should look after our own first. Completely, this is what we do. I'm going to look after my mother before I look after your mother. There's nothing against your mother, it's just how it is. And I'm going to look after your mother before I look after somebody's mother who I've never even met before. That's how it works. We should look after our own first. Yes, of course, we are by and large already doing this. And I'm going to give you the real numbers. I'm going to give you comparisons. I'm going to try and hold this phone as still as I can. And but specifically what's worrying me is when you see this, we should look after our own first. That's fine. We're already doing that. To a high extent, it's not perfect. There are issues, absolutely, but by and large, Australia is well and truly already doing this. The problem when people say this, we should look after it. The problem is when people say this and they're implying a dramatic change from what we've historically done. That is an issue. That's a very, very serious issue. It's selfish and it's harmful. And okay, who cares about forget about it even being selfish, but it's harmful. And I'm talking about losing the country harmful, or perhaps losing a significant part of the country harmful. So when you see somebody say we should look after our own first, have a good think about that, because if they're talking about what we've historically done and what's historically been successful, by and large, that's fine. But the problem is that's not what's going on. We've got people saying this, we should look after our own first, and they're suggesting changes which are completely different than what we've done in the past. And I'm talking about welfare, I'm talking about defence, I'm talking about pretty much everything. That's dangerous. So keep a very close eye on that. It's come up a bit, obviously we should look after our own first. It's come up a bit in relation to Ukraine. Help them, not help them, blah, 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 all the stories. And recently Albanese has said, we may need to send people there. A lot of alarm bells about that. It's certainly not the first time we've had to send people overseas. That's pretty much the pillar of our defence strategy, is sending people overseas. We've got 90,000 people that work for the Australian Defence Force. We haven't had a death in the Defence Force. The last death in combat in the Australian Defence Force was Cameron Bard. Respect to the guy, respect to his family, RIP. Extremely sad. I would hate to lose a son. But that was one guy nearly 13 years ago. Now we've got 90,000 people working in the Defence Force. It's one of our biggest budgets as a thing. But let's just focus on Ukraine. We're sending all our money over to Ukraine. We should focus on our own first. That's a problem. That is it's a terrible misunderstanding. And let's just talk about what is the budget. How much money do we have, and how much are we sending? In the last I've got the figures here for 23-24, but I've added in part of the second half of 24 as well. 944 billion That's the government's money, all right? You know, for people like me, maybe having $900 in the bank's a big deal, but this is 944 billion. How much went to Ukraine? 1.5 billion in that time. It sounds like a lot, but when you're talking about something that's 944 billion, you're talking not even, you're talking about a third of 0.5%. Let's put it another way. If I had 100 beers, you know, so you're talking about like 4 or 5 cartons here sitting on this table, I'm going to be keeping 99 to myself, all 99 unopened, they're all for me. And then I'm going to take one bottle, and how much am I going to give Ukraine? I've got 100 bottles here. I'm going to give Ukraine a sixth of that bottle, a sixth of a bottle, and I've already got 100 bottles here. So that kind of commitment to a major global conflict is not a large amount, and it's not out of whack with what we've done historically. We have done this every single time. In a big way, we have overrepresented it in every conflict. And frankly, we need to, because we're a sitting duck. We are absolutely a sitting duck. Australia is a continent the size of Europe with minerals the size of Africa. We shouldn't be one. You know, frankly, it's a miracle that Australia is one country. You know, we should probably look a lot more like South America, with these multiple countries there, with Asian sort of influence and this and that. Yeah, it's really a freak of history that Australia's managed to be one country on this massive continent. Okay, sure, you might say, oh yeah, the land's unusable, but yeah, okay, how unusable is the Pilbara at the moment, and all that iron ore? It's a miracle that Australia, and barely any people, you know, 26 million people on something that could have 10 times that number easily. I mean, look at our neighbours, Indonesia. Well, how many people are there now? So we have to go hard in these international matters to provide defence for ourselves. We've been doing this since before Australia was even officially Australia. But yeah, so let's move along. 900, so I've got some numbers up here from my budget and so on. Where are we? 944 billion, and of that, 1.5 billion went to Ukraine. And okay, you know, a sixth of a bottle of you've had 100 bottles of beer, and you're giving someone a sixth. I mean, that's, you give your designated driver a shitload more than that. Yeah, if somebody offered me a sixth of a beer, yeah, well, I mean, have a look at this room here, this classroom. You know, I don't know how many meters it is, but let's just say it's 6 by 6 meters. You know, if each square meter here is 3% of the space, so I need to get into like this sort of tiny absolute corner of this whole room, this massive room, and I'm just got to really, really push myself into the corner to demonstrate how small that amount is. Yeah. Where's it going? You know, some of the comments about, you know, Zelensky, oh, he's taking all the money. I mean, how on earth is that guy going to be enjoying that money? How is he enjoying the money, man? The guy, I mean, frankly, like, he's probably got to be the world's #1 assassination target for maybe up to 5 years now, if you include some of the time. How enjoyable is it to watch the people that you are supposed to lead die every day? And have those. I mean, it's just stupidity. Seriously, I mean, sometimes I'm overwhelmed by the responsibility of running. You know, well, you know, with my wife running the household. I mean, that's a full-on task for me, and Zelensky's got that a million times more. You know. As all political leaders do, and I think most people are trying to do their best, and I think most people believe that what they're doing is the right thing. And I think most people already agree with this. We have to look after our own first. That's common sense. But yeah, so okay. I got the foreign aid amount there at 5 billion. So even the foreign aid, even the whole foreign aid amount, not just Ukraine, I'm talking all the foreign aid, is 5 billion. So we're still talking half a percent. Now I'm going to show you some figures, and you should be able to click pretty quickly that there is a lot of money getting spent in Australia, and I'm talking about welfare going to multi-millionaires. That's just happening, and that's taken up a lot more than 0.5%. And the doozy, the absolute doozy is we get so much more back. I mean, Australia pretty much makes a profit from that. It definitely does. Foreign aid is a misnomer. We make a huge profit from those arrangements. So where is it going? Ukraine 1.5 billion, not a large amount. That is 1 year. But yeah, then we come to the other places. I don't know if you can see that there. PNG, 5 million a year. We make about 3 times that off a 90% share in PNG's biggest gold mine. East Timor, another example there. We have got a very unfair share of the gas in one of the major reserves there, which is right on East Timor. Australia gets if you look at a map, you think it's robbery. So we're giving them 100 million a year. I don't know how much we get from that, but I'm sure it's a hell of a lot more than 100 million. And the other places here, Indonesia, 300 million. I mean, that's like $1 per person in Indonesia. It's hardly a big amount. And they are, look, PNG, not only is the gold mine there, but we've also got a 10-year security deal with them. That's the very same security deal that China wants. And I've got nothing against China. China has not got a history of aggression. When you really look at history, when you look at how China moved into Thailand, they moved into Indonesia, they moved into the Philippines. When you look at how they did that, there were no wars. If anything, they were the targets of the violence. There was no genocide. There were no bounties on natives' heads like we had in Australia and Tasmania. None of that happened when the Chinese moved into Southeast Asia. And I'm not trying to be a Chinese sympathizer here, but I'm just saying that's the facts. There was no wars there. Millions of people moved into Southeast Asia from China, and there basically were not conflict. Half the Thai population is Chinese Thai, and it was just a smooth transition. They're just interested in the region as we're interested in the region, and that's why we've got these deals here. China would love to have the same deal with all of these places. China could probably pay most of these guys 10 times what we're paying them. Solomon Islands, Fiji. I don't know too much about Samoa and Tonga. I've got some mates from Samoa, but I'm sure those things are heavily in Australia's interest. Make no mistake there. Cambodia, 80 million. Far out. That's got to be like, shit, is that even 1% of 1%? Are we talking about like 1,000th of the budget there? Now, we had 1 million Australians going to Cambodia in 2022 on tourism. So, we're all connected. Looking after our own. We should look after our own first. Well, do we look after those 1 million Australians? Now, to be honest, it probably wasn't 1 million because there were probably double entries there, but visa runs and so on. It might have been 1 million Australian entries. But yeah, 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 people. We've got to look after them, and they're not in Australia. There's a lot of Australians all over the world, and that's part of the reason why the money's going there. Myanmar's a bit similar. Not that we've got tourism there, but yeah, if you know what's going on in Myanmar, it's a mess. 60 million is not a lot of money for that kind of situation. So there we go, 944 billion, 0.5% on foreign aid. Now, you're probably thinking, where on earth is all this money going? We're supposed to be looking after our own first. Well, we absolutely, definitely are. There's no doubt about it. 95, Australia's like, a tiny part of the globe, and yet we spend all our money locally. Let's have a look at those numbers. Okay. Ukraine, 1.5 billion Ukraine. That is a major geopolitical situation with huge implications. We're already seeing the stock markets crash. There's a lot going on that affects Australia directly and indirectly. So 1 billion. Let's look across. Where is our money going? Where, as we hear, we should look after our own first. Our taxpayer dollars. Yeah, sure thing. But the government revenue isn't just your taxpayers' dollars. Exactly. It's not Australian workers' taxpayers' dollars. Exactly. That's less than half of the revenue, about 49%. GST. GST is what everybody who enters Australia pays. You've got all those international students, they're all paying GST. GST is about 20% of the budget. You don't even need to be Australian to be contributing to the Australian revenue. Company tax, you could argue that we pay that indirectly, but yeah, another 25%. Government fees, nearly 10% of the total revenue, government fees, and it's things like visas. I got to keep this moving along, but let's cut across to where the money's gone. Biggest cost, age pension, 65 billion. I got no problems with that whatsoever, but we do have 400,000 millionaires on the full age pension. And what am I talking about there? I'm talking about people who have more than $1 million in assets getting $500 a week. That's massive. That's easily the most generous age pension in the world. By far, I've compared UK, Canada, no one is as generous as Australia when it comes to government paid pensions, particularly if you own a house. They don't get that in the US, no way. And let's just cut across to what is that age pension? How much is it? Well, I better run through this bit by bit. There's a lot here, but yeah, look, 65 billion age pension. How much are these 400,000 millionaires getting? Can anyone do the maths there? So it's about $30,000 a year. If you had like 1 million people getting 30, it's just great. It's got to be a huge amount. It's got to totally eclipse that Ukraine amount. Absolutely, it's our biggest one-off thing. Age pension. Then we've got the other welfare. Yeah, let's compare it there. NDIS, 42 billion. That is, it's great. It's helping people. It's helping people who need it. But that is an insane amount. That is. Look at it. It's 4 times more than unemployment benefits. 4 times more. If you want to have an attack of dole bludgers, you're probably better off looking at who's claiming to be disabled when they're not actually disabled. That's a huge amount. We've got more than $5 billion going to help people whose disability is mental health. Now, that's fine, that's good, that's helping them. It's getting them positive results in the long term. It's turning people into taxpayers. It's economic, okay? It's expensive, but it's economic. We spend more on people who are claiming to be disabled because of mental health, and okay, surely they are, but then these things. Family. You'd be surprised there. That's all the childcare, all the family tax benefit, all the parenting payments is still half of the disability stuff. What are the other big ones? Health, massive, 100 billion. Quite interesting, 500,000 nurses. That's why the nurses' salaries are so sensitive, because all you need to do is add up, you add 10 grand here, and I think that works out to be it adds up quickly. That's why the nursing salaries are sensitive, but they are already some of the highest in the world. When the Australian dollar's high, our healthcare staff do have some of the best salaries in the world, as do our teachers, as do our police. I didn't put police here, but defence. What have we got there? 408 again. It's actually 4.7. Indigenous programs, 4 billion. But yeah, defence. This is quite surprising. 60 billion, especially if you're living in Perth, where you don't really see a lot of the army, the defence forces, the navy, what have you. They're around, but they're not so visible. we have 90,000 people working in the Defence Force. Now, there's been a big objection there about sending Australian peacekeepers to Ukraine, and obviously the last thing I want is anyone's son to be killed in anywhere, Ukraine, defending the country. But we do have 90,000 people who have been drawing a salary for a long time, and I'm not saying these people have to go there, but this is a major part of our budget, 60 billion. So what's going on with that? Why do we have this 60 billion? It's just we are looking after our first. But how have we done this over history? What has our strategy been? Our strategy has never been to stay in Australia. That is not our approach. That's not our defence. That's not how it works for Australia. And frankly, that's common sense. It has to be like that. Like I mentioned, we've got a whole continent. We've got a whole pile of minerals. We've barely scratched the surface with exploration. It's a miracle that it's not 10 different countries, frankly. How strong, how hard do you think, how fortified do you think Broome is? The Japanese army could have rolled through there, and they did. Once again, it was Japan could have very easily annexed the top half of Australia, not a problem. And China could very easily do it now, very easily. What have they got, 70 submarines? We've got 0. We're relying on our allies. And that's how we look after our own. We look after our own by building a strong alliances. We've been doing this. Look, put some dates out here just in case people didn't know. 1899, we sent people off to South Africa for the Boer War. Life was a hell of a lot tougher in 1899 than today. There was no, welfare. So we've been doing this a long time. We're the first ones out there. We overrepresent. We're in World War I, we're in World War II, we're in Korea, we're in Vietnam, we are in Kuwait, we're in Iraq, we're in Afghanistan. We jump out there and do this stuff because, not because we want to save the world, no. It's helping others that puts us first. That's how it works. We rely on these alliances. These countries here, like I mentioned there, PNG, if someone comes down, and I'm not anti-China at all. Frankly, like if you look at what's happened in the last few weeks, China's almost looks like got a halo above its head. But look at these places. PNG, if someone comes into Australia, PNG, where do you think the front line's going to be? Where do you think the front line was last time? It's PNG. That's part of the reason why we're sending money there. We should look after our own first. We do. That's how we do it. We send 500 million to PNG because we get 1.3, 1.4 billion profit back from a gold mine, and that is the buffer. This is self-interested stuff. The worst thing that we could do is, in fact, I think this is not enough. 500 million, a 10 year, I don't think 10 years is enough. I don't even know if they'll hold out 10 years, to be honest. But yeah, it's their alliances. PNG, Solomon Islands, Fiji. Fiji is on a par with New Zealand in terms of, our alliance there. That's what we're doing there. We're creating this alliance. We expect these guys to help us. When we help, then I help you in a street fight, I expect you to help me back. That's the Australian way. And it's been the Australian way for a damn long time. So, not helping in Ukraine, not helping allies, not helping the UK, and increasingly Canada, and US was part of it. Not helping them would be a very bad thing to do. it would just be stupid. It would be that level of stupidity. Not helping PNG would China would be in there within hours, and they'd be in that gold mine within hours, and they would be controlling that buffer zone within hours. And what kind of defence do you think we've got at the top of Australia? How much defence do you think those guys in Alice Springs are going to be providing? I'm not, I don't know what the hell goes in Alice Springs. I'm sure there's some fantastic people there. My uncle used to be there. He wasn't impressed, but yeah, he said it was full of outlaws. But I don't know what's going on in the Northern Territory, but I can guarantee you that there is definitely not enough defence there to keep out. I mean, it's a miracle that Indonesia, so many countries could move into the Northern Territory just like that, and the top half of WA. I mean, there's just nothing there. There's no defence. We are relying on the submarines and navy of the US, of the UK. So this is the alliance that I'm talking about here. That's what the alliance we're trying to work. That's one of the alliances. We're also trying to work with Singapore and Malaysia and the ASEAN countries to have a bit of an alliance there. We do some stuff with India, Japan. Obviously the Commonwealth. King Charles, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. That's it's. You would have to be out of your mind to want to leave the Commonwealth at this point in time. Even though historically a lot of those places, they haven't done so much for us, arguably, but that's a long story. That's why we do that. That's why we send the money there. To stop doing that would be crazy. And so let's level this. We should look after our own first. Okay. We're already doing this. We're doing it successfully. But if you're going to say we should look after our own first, and if by that you mean that we shouldn't send 500 million to PNG, we're getting from what I saw last time, it was something like nearly 1.4 billion profit back from that 90% share in a gold mine. If you think that stopping this is looking after our own first, that is look, obviously this is not the kind of thing you learn in primary school or even high school or really anywhere, but these are official government numbers, and we've got no reason to doubt them. Indonesia, yeah, like I said there, it's kind of a miracle that Indonesia hasn't come further into Australia. They may do. They very well may do. It would not surprise me. If anyone's going to do anything geopolitically, now is the time, because the current US government has really they pretty much sent out a message that saying that we're not going to help allies, and there's no point distinguishing. A lot of people are still caught up in this Ukraine and USSR and Russia and like Ukraine belongs to the USSR, like in the same way that WA belongs to Australia. No. It's Ukraine was separate before. Ukraine sent 6,000 soldiers to Iraq, helping the US. They had something like 100 deaths and hundreds of injuries. They were one of the forefront forces in Iraq. That's been totally forgotten. Absolutely forgotten. I don't know. I can't actually remember if Canada was in Iraq. I think they were, but from what I read, Ukraine forces were the 5th largest. I think UK was 2nd. Australia might have been 3rd or 4th. And they suffered something like the 4th highest amount of fatalities. Now that's just been totally forgotten by the US. It's a long story, but in short, Ukraine has a legitimate claim to be a sovereign nation. That's just beyond reasonable doubt. I mean, if to doubt that, you would need to doubt every Australian Prime Minister that's that's ever lived and who is currently living. And you would also have to doubt the opposition leaders as well. We've got Peter Dutton, we've got Tony Abbott, we've got John Howard. All of these guys, these are the Conservatives, this is the right wing. They all disagree with Trump, essentially, with what's going on now. They think it's crazy. Yeah, Roger Cook called JV, whatever the guy's name is, VD, STIDV or something, Bats. He said he's a knob. They all disagree with this stuff. It's because it goes against this history of essentially helping out, and we only help out to help ourselves. It's not an altruistic thing, you know. Yeah, there is a passion there to God save the King, you know, King Charles, Queen Elizabeth. There is something there. There's a solid loyalty, but there is also, I mean, Britain. Look, democracy. I don't think anyone's doubting the democracy of the UK and the legal system and all the rest of it. You know, I mean, London was recently listed as the most powerful city in the world on this pretty reputable index. So UK is still a big deal. They do a lot of foreign aid. They do a hell of a lot more foreign aid than the US per person. The UK sent more people to Afghanistan per person on a per person basis than the US. The UK had more fatalities in Afghanistan than the US on a per person basis. They don't step back from a fight, you know, and I don't. That's roughly what's going on. Anyway, so yeah, this story, we should look after our own first. Very problematic. Yeah, like I said, everyone's trying their best. We're all optimistic. Everyone who's saying we should look after our first, they all have good intentions. I think that's obvious. But if someone's saying this, and their idea is to, you know, reduce this spending here, which is just practically tiny when you're talking about $1 trillion, and this is our essential defense infrastructure. I mean, it's like it's no different from it's roughly the same as having a guard at the front of your house. I mean, if you had a guard at the front of your house, you would be paying, I assume, a hell of a lot more than 1% or 1% of your total budget for that guard. So, yeah, we need to look after our own first. When this is said in a non-helpful way, it's usually coming from that same sort of ethnocentric, partially racist sort of, you know, I don't want to say uneducated, but you know, you'd have to generally be talking about not uneducated, but I don't see how people could understand the full story and still say something like this with the connotation that Australia needs to pull out of what we've been doing for over nearly 150 years. Where are they coming from? I mean, a lot of problems with our own, you know, our own, who is our own? I mean, if you consider we should look after our own first, if you believe that Australia is pretty much already well and truly doing this, bipartisan support, both sides of governments, it's something that just about I would probably, well, far out, it would have to be something like 95% or even 99% of politicians who have ever been elected in Australia believe the same thing. You know, they all believe the same thing. Dutton believes it. Albanese believes it. All of the Labour side believes it. The Greens all believe it. Go down to Liberals, all believe it. You know, it's for me. I used to be a very active member of the Liberal Party. I'm not a member of any party at the moment. But it did honestly warm my heart to see Peter Dutton came out with quite strong support for Ukraine and Zelensky, and that was a good thing. But yeah, these guys who are saying this, who they want to cut the foreign aid, well, look, you're worried about a sixth of a beer, man. You've got 99 beers in front of you. What are you doing with those 99 beers? That's the real issue. It's all of the problems in Australia, we've got our own problems, and we do. And life's not easy. You have to work hard to have a good life in Australia. You have to work hard to be able to afford stuff. Yeah, absolutely. We've got the safety nets. I'll talk about that. But at the end of the day, to have that better life, you do need to work hard. But fortunately, there are a lot of options. But yeah, these guys, they're worried about this 0.5%, or they're worried about sending it. Hey, don't worry about sending Australian peacekeepers to Ukraine. I mean, like I mentioned there, we had the last death was in 2013, and it was sad, and RIP to that guy in a campaign that a lot of things could be said, but it wasn't a good one. But we were there in Afghanistan primarily to help the US, and we were there. When I say we were there to help them, we were only there to help them because we believe in, if I help you in a street fight, I expect you to help me back. That's what we believe. That's why we're there. But yeah, 90,000 people. If you look at the 12, 13 years, you've got a 1 in 1.2 million chance of dying. That's pretty low for a soldier, if you ask me. We've had way more deaths in the state police forces. If you're on smoke and crack, you probably got a 1 in 10 chance of dying this year or next year, or perhaps the next year. So 1 in a million chance of dying. Yeah. But yeah, who is our own? When you say this sentence and you mean that we're already looking after our own, well then it doesn't really matter who are our own. Everyone's trying their best. But the people who are saying this and they want less, this already tiny amount spent on Ukraine, this tiny amount spent on foreign aid, and it's all strategically spent, it's all in Australia's interest. The people who want to reduce this, who exactly do they want to help? Who is our own? I mean, think about the history of Australia. I was trying to keep this short, but our own in Australia was built on a policy of the people who are already living here weren't our own. The Aboriginals weren't our own. Legally, technically. It wasn't until a few years before I was born that Aboriginal people had full rights in Australia. They weren't our own. Europeans have been here since the 1700s, and yet it was almost in my life that Indigenous people became fully our own. I mean, who is our own? That's my point here. There's some people that I know that are going to vote for One Nation, and when they say our own, they're talking about white Australia, and they're talking even more so English white Australia. That's what they're thinking about our own. And that's where you get a lot of confusion about what's going on, because, well, what are you talking? Who do you mean our own? I mean, look, we've got dual citizenship these days. We've got citizen by descent. You can have Australian citizenship without ever even coming to Australia, and that's not a bad thing. Citizenship by descent. Some of my kids were born in Thailand. They spent years out of Australia, but they had Australian citizenship. People have dual citizenship. I think that's a good thing. Some people have 4 citizenships. If you're rich, you might have 10 citizenships. Is somebody with 10 citizenships our own? I mean, is citizenship the only thing that we're considering? Who is our own? Are we talking about contribution? Because what about that guy that's never contributed a cent to the economy? And that's extremely rare, because we've got a very low unemployment rate. Is he our own? How about that murderer who's a serial murderer, Martin Bryant, costing us $1 million every 5 years sitting in jail? Is he our own that we should look after first? Because we're spending more on that guy than we're spending on more important things. How about people who are risking their life savings to come to Australia for the benefit of Australia? Okay, let's take like a nurse from the Philippines who just got divorced, and she's selling her house and getting rid of her assets in the Philippines, and she's spending $100,000, $200,000 to do some course here to get accredited, and then she's going to work in ICU or ED and save Australian lives. Is she our own? When does she become our own? She's contributing way more than most locals. Is she our own? Or does she have to marry someone to become our own? What about her daughter? Who exactly is our own? yeah, that's why a lot of this anti-migration stuff, it's a bit silly. I get the frustration with the problems, and that's the next tie on. You sort of get this. We should look after our own first, and we've got our own problems. Okay, we've got our own problems. Yeah, I'm not denying that things aren't easy. Yeah, you have to work hard in Australia to pay the bills, to have an enjoyable life, to buy some of the things you want to buy. Yeah, you do have to work hard. I have no doubt about it. But we've got some pretty solid safety nets there. Universal basic income. That means that every citizen gets some money. That's what it is. That's as simple as that. Every citizen gets some money. How much does every citizen get in Australia? $500. At least per week. Okay, yeah, kids might not get that, but their parents will have some parenting payment. People sitting in jail, well, far out. Those guys in jail are costing us $3,000 per week. So if you want to talk about anti-Australian, yeah, people sitting in jail. And I know there's some good people who've been in jail and going to jail and this and that, but yeah, who is our own first, So yeah, universal basic income. It includes rent assistance. Yeah, so the poorest people have a pretty significant chunk of their rent paid. You just have to, you do need to sit on that point for a while, because as mentioned over there with the age pension, it is one of the most generous arrangements in the world, as on the whole. So what are our own problems? What exactly are our own local problems? Because in Cambodia, there is no UBI. That mother who's 35 or 40 or 30, never been to school, is starving, living in a shack kind of thing. She needs to sell her daughter into prostitution. The daughter might be 12, 13, 14, into prostitution, into some massage house, or into some marriage with some guy who's already 30 or 40 or 50. That's what she's doing. What are the guys doing over there? The guys go off and work in these terribly dangerous jobs. I mean, you just, if you've been over to Southeast Asia, you've probably seen how dangerous some of these arrangements are. No seatbelts, sitting in the back of utes, just dangerous, sharp things, heavy objects, people dying all the time. That's what people have to deal with because they don't have this UBI. So that's hard shit. That's tough stuff. We've got the UBI. Now, what are these problems that we have? We all have problems. Yes, we all have problems, but personally, I think it's unethical. I think it's ridiculous. Frankly, I think it's ridiculous to compare that mother selling her daughter into prostitution, and that is not a rarity. That is almost the norm in some of these very, very poor countries. And, part of this money is for that. And when you see that money for anti-homophobia, or money for condoms, or money for various things, it's some of this stuff that we're talking about. It's there is a need there. There is a homophobe problem in countries. There is a bona fide problem there. There are a lot of countries where they will kill gay people. I've had students in my class tell me that you could be killed in their country if you were gay. That's the problem. That's not cool. So, yeah, what are our problems? Our problems, okay, housing, yeah. I understand the frustration, 100%. I was talking about this issue in 2003. I think it's absolute bullshit what's going on. But to me, it seems to be completely a domestic issue. You've got, if you kicked out all the migrants, which some people want to do, if you kick them all out, okay, there might be some more houses available, but what's stopping those mum and dad investors who have already got 6 or 7 houses, or 3 or 4 or 5, what's stopping them buying those houses that come on the market ahead of, let's say, that young single lady or guy that wants to buy it? I'll tell you what's stopping them. Nothing's stopping it. That's what already happens. We're already thoroughly entrenched with a system that supports investment in housing. We're mad about it. As safe as houses, Aussies are just. We don't seem to want to invest in anything productive. We invest in established houses. We don't build houses. That's the problem. Capital gains, negative gearing. It's how it works in Australia is quite unique, and it's quite unfortunate. But it is a domestic problem. It's got nothing to do with that Ukraine war. It's got nothing to do with that poor lady in Cambodia. It's just got nothing to do with it. Like, the banks don't want that single guy who's got one income. They're not interested in him. They want the mum and dad over there who have already got 4 or 5 houses, who have got equity, have got a leverage, they've got a record, a strong credit rating. They've got backup. That's what the banks want. The banks want multiple income streams. That's what they want. That's why it's so hard for young people to bust in there, particularly single people. So housing, from what I've seen, it's a completely domestic issue. We've got barriers on the supply side with the NIMBYism, the cost of building, the cost of labour, the subdivision. That's what I think. Cost of living, cost of living, it's increased. The wage increases haven't increased with the inflation increases. That's mainly been related to housing, but other areas as well. Cost of living, but you still got to get back to this UBI. We're still talking 500 minimum for each adult. That's minimum. That's for the guy who's actually disabled. That's for the guy who can't work because he's a paraplegic. We've got, like I mentioned before, we've got millionaires getting this. So anyway, we've got this 500 minimum a week. Cost of living, 500 a week, it works out to be something like 2.1, like 2,100, 2,200 a month. That's about 40,000 baht. That is a great salary in Thailand. That is a high salary in Thailand. And I lived in Thailand for a long time, and I'll tell you that a lot of food products were cheaper and still are cheaper in Oz compared to Thailand. If you're talking about, a lot of the food products in Thailand come from Australia. If you're talking about the meats, the beef, the lamb, the dairy, some of the oranges and so on. So there isn't a big difference between the price of food in Thailand and the price in Australia. If you're talking about supermarket stuff, if you're talking about noodles on the street, obviously it's different. If you're talking about a fried rice on the street, it's different. But at the supermarket, there ain't much difference. And everyone in Australia has the equivalent of a great salary in Thailand. So, what are the other local issues exactly? Jobs? I don't think so. Our unemployment rate is so low, 3.6%, that it's actually too low. We are losing productivity because of they're paying people too much for some roles that's an issue. We've got low productivity. When your unemployment rate gets less than 5%, it's bad for the economy. That's what we've got at the moment. We've got too many jobs, not enough people. That is clearly the problem here, and that's also creating inflation. So it's, we should look after our own first. That's why we bring doctors. That's why we bring nurses from the Philippines. That's why we bring pretty much every skilled person. That's why we bring even these semi-skilled areas, like a whole pile of things. It's looking after us first because we need those services. We need to get these cost of living things down. What are the other issues? Drugs. Are drugs a major issue here? I don't think so. I think that's more of a personal thing, and we're not living on a drug factory. We don't have mountains where at the top of the mountain there's 50 guys with guns and literally a factory making amphetamines or ecstasy or whatever. We don't have that in Australia. We don't have that kind of opium wars kind of drug problem. There's people ODing, but who's to blame for that? You're going to blame the government for that OD? You've got to take a bit of personal responsibility. If you're going to start consuming dangerous substances, and I'm generally very pro when it comes to legalization and so on, but to call drugs an Australian problem is silly, and it's got nothing to do with Ukraine or migration or whatever. Mental health crisis. How much of a mental health crisis do you think this lady who's selling her daughter into prostitution has? Because that's the person who's should be having some pretty serious trauma. $5 billion for mental health alone, like mental health as a disability alone. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that mental health as a disability was strictly not covered. Wasn't that long ago. Wasn't covered in the negligence law, and it certainly wasn't covered in this kind of sense in a welfare way. Is it a bad thing? No, I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think you do need to be realistic of what you're talking about when you're saying we've got our own problems, because they simply pale in comparison to internationally. And then not even that, you can just forget all of that. And then this immigration, the slogan for Australia used to be populate or perish, and nothing's changed. How much longer do you think we can sit on this continent with 20 million people? It's insane. Without immigration, our birth rate is dropping. I mean, what are these 90,000 people who work for the Defence Force doing exactly? How are they protecting what? How is the 60 billion, more, almost the amount that we spend? It's more than we spend on schools. Somehow these 90,000 people, if their salaries, look, you're talking 10 billion, 15 billion on salaries there. How are they getting way more than schools, and way more than? How is that happening? I would like to know. And it's almost getting close to health there. What's going on with that? That's what I'd like to know. We need the numbers. We need the numbers. We need the integration with the local area, with the regional area. That's what we're doing here. That's why we send the money here. Why are we helping Ukraine? Because we want those guys to. It's a street fight. We're helping them. We expect them to help us in return. And you're not just talking Ukraine there. You're talking the EU. You're talking South Korea. You're talking Japan. You're talking pretty much every country that has a trustworthy system of democracy, where you can walk into that country and you can say what you like, roughly speaking, and not worry about anyone coming to kill you. Not worrying about you disappearing like the opposition party leader in Russia. That's what we're talking about here. Hopefully some of that made sense. I know everyone's trying their best. I know I look a bit like a ghost here. I'm pretty tired, but I did need to get some of these numbers across. It's a miracle that Australia is still just Australia by itself, but it's going to take some intense work internationally, and that's what we're trying to do. And we should look after our own first. Yes, of course, but if you're saying this and you're implying that we need to reduce migration, particularly skilled migrants, because skilled migrants, they're not going anywhere near this welfare stuff. Like, it's the studies, skilled migrants, the average age is 27. They are less, it's something like less than your third and fourth and fifth generation Aussies, roughly people like me, are more likely to be on welfare than your first and second generation Aussies. Because those guys are younger and they're skilled migrants and they've come here to work and they want to improve their life in the new country, and they're not going to sit on welfare somewhere and claim to have some kind of crazy disability. I mean, I read one statistic that said 1 in 5 Australians are claiming to be disabled at the moment. That's that kind of shit is unpatriotic. Those guys avoiding tax, that's unpatriotic. Not supporting Ukraine, supporting our allies in a strategic way, there's nothing wrong with that. These are the areas, those 99 beers on the table, that's where you want to have a look at what's going on. That's what I say. And I don't think there's any issue with what's going on there, to be honest. I mean, I would like to know what these 90,000 people are doing. How did we end up with Chinese warships circling Australia in the last few days? Look, the timing there, and this, shit. I mean, We've literally got Chinese warships circling Australia, and that's never happened so obviously like this before. We are in threat of losing the country, and Trump is clearly helping that along. And if you get caught in with that whole, and this is the whole mantra that Trump brought along, make Australia great and America's first, it's backfiring something cruel, and it's hurting the Americans. It's hurting the Standard & Poor S&P is, what are they dropped to $3 trillion in the last 10 days? I mean, look at Bitcoin's dropped a shitload. Who starts a war with Canada? Far out. Have you met a Canadian? Have you ever met an angry Canadian? Far out, man. Canadians are kind of like, far out, man. Like, Canadians are just great people. I mean, Canada's the kind of place you go and your gardener has like a PhD. I mean, none of this shit happens in a vacuum, We're closer than we've ever been with our neighbours, with our allies. We've got more evidence of what's going on. It's all in front of us. Things have never been this transparent, and it's at the time, and that's why I said I'm positive, because I am, because there's some great signs out there, Crime is down across the world. Yeah, far out. If you get somebody telling you that Australia's got a crime problem, yes, but compared to the rest of the world, no, it doesn't. That's what I'm talking about, guys. If somebody says we should look after our own first, yeah, I totally agree. As long as they are referring to essentially continuing what we've always done, and we've always had high numbers of migrants. We've always had migrants come in at about 2% a year, and in recent years it's dropped down to 1%. There isn't any. We had COVID closed. A lot of families who had visas couldn't come. A lot of marriages, the partner couldn't come, and mothers and fathers and daughters and children couldn't come in, and that's why they sort of all came over in 1 year. Anyway, guys, it's going to cut out any minute, but I'm leaving it here. Hopefully some of that made sense. Look after your own first. That means trusting people who know what they're doing, and it doesn't mean major changes. Stopping funding allies is a major change, and it's not cool. That's what I reckon. What do you think?